Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Welcome to the video. I'm going to be recreating Latto's Lottery. And throughout the video, I'll be sharing some music production tips and techniques that you might want to be using in your projects as well. So I'm going to start off with my version of the recreated song and then walk you through step by step of the process. Now, before I dive into the drums, I actually want to highlight something that could be really helpful in your overall production workflow, and that is picking up where you left off from another session. Incorporating other session projects into your current project can be really helpful in hitting the ground running with your ideas. What I mean by that is I'm actually going to go to my hard drive, and if you're a regular visitor to this channel, you know that I regularly take songs that are charting on the radio and recreate them for the purpose of just kind of educating and helping you guys take your next step with your music production. And I've accumulated a bunch of files of remade songs. So I figured, hey, this has got that disco up-tempo type of vibe to it. Why don't I just use something that I've done already that really takes a lot of the burden of having to recreate it from scratch. So here in my Finder window, this is the folder of all the remakes. By the way, if you want access to all the remake files that I've done on this channel, I'm updating that. So just click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/pack. But I'll give you access to the Ableton Live sessions that I've done for pretty much a lot of the videos that I share and showcase on this channel. So I want to go ahead and revisit the Dua Lipa Don't Stop Now project. And so what I'll do is I'll just literally just drag and drop that session into my current existing session. And then what it's going to do is literally add all the elements to that prior session into my current session, but at the current tempo and the settings that I have this current session at. As you can see here, here is all the data from the Dua Lipa Don't Start Now stuff. And I'm mostly focusing on the drums, right? That's the drum track here. And so I might need to reallocate, find, or relocate some of the files. But once I've done that, I can save those projects in a specific place here on my browser. And that's going to make it really easy for me to just access. So I can go and put that project here, and then I can just simply have it on my browser window. So it's just really easy to gravitate towards. And the bonus of having it in your browser window is that I can literally just unpack the actual session here and just nitpick the specific item or track or plugin or something like that that I want to incorporate into my current project. Think of it like this. Let's say you've worked on an arrangement of a song that you just finished producing, and there's certain transition effects or there's certain things that you're going to be using. Very much evident in a lot of EDM tracks where you have build-ups and swooshes and things like that. Well, instead of having to painstakingly do that, I can now drag and drop that from an existing session and get somewhat of a template and a guide to know, oh, this is where the chorus should be. This is where this should be. Why? Because I already have it set to that arrangement from my previous session. So I share all of that because I think that's a really beneficial tip and a really helpful one to help you hit the ground running when it comes to producing your music. So I'm going to just erase that for right now. And that's essentially what I did with the drums. I just grabbed my Dua Lipa Don't Start Now drums, but I've added a couple things, and that's what I want to showcase now. So opening up the drum group, I have a drum rack loaded with the sounds from my Dua Lipa session. Very straightforward, kick on every quarter note, and this layered snare drum with the clap. But what I've decided to do with that drum rack is for the kick drum itself, I'm using the onboard filter to just take away a lot of the low end, right? Everything from 213 hertz below. The reason for that is I'm now going to layer that drum rack with another kick. And I'm mostly doing this because as I pay attention to the reference, I noticed that the kick has just a lot more bottom end presence as opposed to this kick, which is just a lot more thumpier and more high mids. Even though there's some bottom there, I'll filter that out and layer it with another kick drum. And then I have a little bit more control over that low end beef and balance as well. So we have that going on. And then I'm also layering that with a loop that's mirroring the same exact kind of rhythm. And I'm making sure to just make a little space for the low end. Now, those decisions and just kind of EQing thing, it was really just not out of a technical. It's not like, oh, I got to do this with every track. It's just more like, hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then go in there and just clean things up. I don't want to get hung up on the technical, well, I have to just check off a box because the internet told me so. No, just if you hear something problematic, you can go in there, use the tools you have on hand to correct it. But I've got these then, the kick drum, the groove I created with the drum rack, and the loop all kind of living together on our drum bus here. So we've got our glue compressor, drum bus, saturator, and EQ. Let me walk you through each part of this. So with the glue compressor, let's turn this off. Real quick break and we'll get right back into the lesson. I just want to give you the heads up that you can download this Ableton Live session as well as the session for a lot of the videos mentioned in this channel by just simply clicking the link below in the description box or visiting beatacademy.com/pack. That's how you can download this session as well as many other sessions so that you can watch this video again, follow along, or simply use the techniques in those sessions in your projects as well. Included in that link, extra goodies that I've bundled together, effects, vocal chains, sample packs, and so many more goodies. So be sure to click the link below to get access to that right away. All right, let's head back to the lesson. I'm not looking to make things louder. I want to add a specific type of characteristic to the actual sound. So what I'm looking for is I would like this to smack a little bit more. I'd like a little bit of punch to be present, but not at the cost of squeezing the life out of the drums, which could happen with too much compression. So if I put this on and put it at 100%, like with that glue compressor on, compressing the way it is, let's say we have our kick and our snare, boom, God, those are the main foreground elements, kick, snare, everything in between that, the hi-hat, the groove, the nuances, the crackle that's happening in the loop, all that stuff, that's in the valley, that's in the dip. With the compressor, they then kind of rise up and they almost stay at the same, or it can be felt at the same level as the kick and snare. So they're kind of rising up there, right? What I want is not so much of that. I want to balance that out. So I get the settings that I like with the compressor, or I get the initial snappiness that I want, and I dial it back. Just there, subtle, but I like what it's doing. Then the drum bus is going to be used to add some drive, crunch, and using the transient shaper to really allow this to be a lot more staccato in the sense where it's just a lot more punchier, right? So it's funny, we brought the elements up a little bit just to kind of bring them down with the transient. I know it's counterintuitive, but it does something in the way the drums will then feel afterwards. And I'm using the boom just to give some nice low end boost here. But as you can see, it's at 56%. And so I'm not trying to add too much of that. And we're adding a saturator and treating the saturator almost as a limiter, so to speak, which is why I have the soft clipped on. And then EQing to taste. So let's head over to the bass line. So for the actual instrument itself, IK Multimedia's Moto Bass. It's my go-to virtual bass plugin for the past, I don't know, couple years or so. I know there's version 2, so I'm just so lazy. I haven't even upgraded, but I plan to. So you'll probably see Moto Bass 2 showing up pretty soon. And yeah, I'm using the 70s P bass for this. Now, there's a lot of particular kind of tweaking going on within the plugin itself to get the sound that I'm looking for. Now, again, my decision behind doing all this is in light of the reference. If I'm creating something from scratch, then my goalpost, so to speak, is the vibe and feel that I'm looking for. Not necessarily does it sound exactly like what the artist used. This is more like, yeah, this feels right, this feels good, and I like what it does with all the other elements I have in place already. So with the reference, I'm like, okay, is this somewhat near the reference? And again, the goal is not to get the same exact patch that Dr. Luke used when he produced this song, but more so the general vibe and around the ballpark there, so I kind of get the idea of how to recreate that same type of vibe. So 70s P bass, play style, I've got some muting going on here. Let's just listen to that and look at the actual performance. So that's the riff, and let's head over here to the moto bass. I'm actually going into the electronics, messed around with the tone a little bit, went to the amp and effects, and I switched it over to the tube amp, controlling a little bit of the amp and the DI signal. So there's a lot of versatility here. This plugin's really cool, and all the things that you can do to tweak to kind of get a sound that you're looking for, not to mention just the overall selection of basses that you can choose from. Now I want to add some compression, not just to add it, but for the sake of like, okay, how can I then control the overall dynamics of this? And I decided to go with the CLA 76. It's a good way to just get an overall little bit boost of volume and still control the dynamics. Now, what was weird about the bass in the reference is it actually felt like they were taking the low end out of it. It feels like they decided that the kick drum is going to carry a lot of the low end burden, right? So if that's the case, then they just kind of swoop out a little bit of low end and they resonate somewhere around 200 hertz. I don't know. Hey, that's the decision that they went with, and I chose to use a filter to do that. All right, a lot more low end, put it back on. And then use the EQ afterwards to kind of just shape the overall tone. Now this compressor here is our sidechain compression. And when you're doing these type of disco, funk, cool little up-tempo vibes like this, it's always great to add a little bit of sidechain to the bass and the kick or have the kick be the trigger for the sidechain, because then it adds a little bit of that groove element, especially if it's not lively played bass. Now I'm going over here to the audio of the sidechain. The source is going to be the kick track, and I'm set it to pre-effects so that it's the kick before any effects are added to it, and then just dial the threshold all the way down to the point that I want it to. Let's listen to that with the drums. Now for the pads and the keys, I'm not necessarily sure what sounds were being used, but as I'm listening to the reference, I'm like, wow, okay, there's brightness, there's airiness, and there's some type of swirl that's happening, right? And these are words I'm using to describe it, so that it helps me understand swirl, movement, motion. I'm either thinking phaser, chorus, or flanger. That's where you want to start developing your ear training, is understanding, okay, if there's motion, if there's swim, then there's some form of modulation happening. That means I'm going to go towards a chorus, a flanger, and a phaser, and just experiment and see which one is the best one that we want to use. That's how you teach yourself to fish and not just be given the fish, right? That's what you want to start doing, and recognizing how and how can you color the sound of the instruments that you're implementing. Because those details, adding the color, adding the dimension, adding the space, is what really brings a lot of life and separates a lot of amateur productions to professional sounding productions. So here is the keys, or the pads. And so for that, I'm using the Ableton Live wavetable. Just 2 oscillators would do just fine. So if you're following along on FL Studio, Pro Tools, Logic, you can use any stock synthesizer and set your oscillators to this. So oscillator 1 is going to be set to a sawtooth. Oscillator 2 will also be set to a sawtooth, but we're going to go a whole octave higher, so 12 semitones higher. And we're going to slightly detune this so that you get that nice little, just that chorusy effect initially from just the 2 oscillators. And then setting your cutoff frequency down a little bit, and then I'm assigning the cutoff over to envelope 2 just a little bit there so that there's some modulation happening. There's some movement going on every time the chords are played. I'll go to the mod sources and we'll go to envelope 2 and just adjusting this a little bit. A little bit of filter drive, about 1 dB, and then the wideness comes from turning on our unison mode. So usually if you're using Logic or any other DAW, you want to look for your voicing or unison it's located on the synth. This is going to create multiple voices and widen up the sound. It's a beautiful life. Oh, all right. And then we're going to go over here to our reverb, give some space directly on this. I think that's a good spot there. And then here's where that motion comes in. Here's where the movement happens, the modulation. And I'm using a phaser for this. And the phaser setting is set to phaser. We've got the center around 1.54 kilohertz and set the rate to 2. This is just tampering around with it, the dry and wet. I usually start with, mess with your dry and wet first with any plugin. You want to gauge, how does it sound fully on? Is it too much? Scale it back and then start tweaking from there. And I had this EQ on there, really just to kind of shape the overall tone. Now, my EQ decisions are based on context. I have this EQ because if I'm listening to this solo by itself, it sounds fine. But in context with all the other instruments, I need a little bit more low end, or I need a little bit of shimmer from that. And that can create some good tonal balance with everybody together. So if you see the EQ, I'm not making that decision out of context in the sense of like the synths by themselves. I'm listening to the synths with the drums, with the bass. And as I start adding this, yeah, let me get a little bit more brightness from the synths. That helps. Now, what I've done is I literally went ahead and held my Option key on my computer keyboard and dragged that down to a MIDI track, just like this, or an empty spot. It's going to duplicate that track. And what I've done is just literally taken that same MIDI performance and doubled it with a Wurlitzer. So I'm using the Arturia Whirly 5 plugin, the way it comes when you load it up. And what this is going to do is give a nice little texture to this. I'm also doing the same thing with a Juno here, also from Arturia. Now, I'm not layering for the sake of layering. Oh, I see every video where they're laying 7, 18 different synths. No. The decision between me layering, or decision for me layering with the keys, is the body. I want this to kind of be the body. I want this to be, the synth to be more of like the air, or like shimmer. No, this would be the air, and then I'm using the Juno as the shimmer or space, causing some like really big dimensions here. So that means I'm going to have a lot of reverb on this synth. So I'm using the Juno. And let's open this up. We'll put the cutoff frequency up a little bit. And I have a lot of reverb. I'm drowning it in reverb here in the within the actual plugin itself, because this is going to be more of the atmospheric layer to this. So you can see it's the Wurlitzer is the body. Here is the more like the high end, and then this is more of the space and shimmer. It's what I'm doing here. So I have an EQ8, and I'm using the MS, the mid-side mode. So that means that I can then focus on treating the signal in the mid different than the signal I'm hearing on the sides. So for the mids, I wanted to lower this area here because that's where a lot of the brightness from the wavetable is. And the sides here, I'm boosting some of the low mids because that's what I wanted more of that presence on the side information. So let's listen to these three. So you notice as I unsoloed each part, you felt the absence of that element, right? And that's what I'm getting at is each element kind of works together to build one cohesive sound. Now, straight up confession time, I suck as a guitar player. And I knew there was some guitar parts in there. I could hear it. And Dr. Luke is a phenomenal guitar player, or a lot better than I am for that matter. So I did the best I could. And this might actually be helpful for some of you out there who might have a guitar, might not be a virtuoso. Maybe guitar is your strong suit and you can easily put this down. But I think it's pretty helpful to see, how can you kind of fake it till you make it, so to speak. But there's some tools that I'm implementing and procedures that I'm doing that can really just help get the idea across the finish line. So here are the two guitar tracks. So this is me just taking my Telecaster in the back that you see there, recording it directly into the computer and just into my interface here. Dry signal. So I'm not amping it up. So I'll start with the take one. And let's go to the guitar group and just take everything I have on the guitar group and just listen to this dry. So I'm recording it multiple times. You can see here I open up the playlist, and the good thing about having the ability to just comp and get the best takes is that you can mix and match and just be able to get your own best performance after just recording multiple different takes. So in Ableton Live, we have the lanes option, which makes it very, very easy to edit and get the right performance. Once I got that, I then went ahead and recorded it again. I didn't duplicate it. That means I did not just grab this and copied it down here. You can see that they're different. I did my best to double or record another track with this, trying to capture the same exact riff and performance here. So once I had that down, we have both of these tracks. And I'm slightly panning to the left and right. And on each individual guitar track, we have Guitar Rig 5, and I have it set to the Twang Reverb amp. Something clean. I didn't want any heavy distortion because I thought that was kind of close to the reference. Okay, now that we have that, you might see some little chucks here, and that's just to add some nuances to the actual performance. That kind of thing. So what I would do is I would just go over and over and just kind of recording myself just doing a bunch of mutes. And because I don't have the skill set of implementing that cadence or that rhythm while I'm playing, I would just go ahead and insert those mutes in different places to kind of fill out the overall rhythm. And you can see that here as well. What really helps get this to the finish line is just overall processing. So I'm going to use the over-the-top OTT compression here from Ableton Live. This is going to squeeze it a little bit. And then an EQ to just really highlight the high mids here. And then blurring this out and winding it up with chorus directly on it. And sidechain compression, similar to what we did with the bass. So let's listen to this with everybody else in. Now, the goal for me in creating these videos is not necessarily to help you find the same exact sound that the producer or artist use, but more so to encourage you, inspire you to take one of these tips that I'm sharing in these videos and implement them in your music production workflow. Help you take your next step with your music production. And aside from just creating these videos, I'm spending lately a lot of my time in mentoring and investing in aspiring music producers and artists that are serious about creating the vision they have for their music and helping them accomplish that vision. So I do that in my Beat Academy platform. You can get more information on how you can become a Beat Academy Pro member and have me come alongside you to help you do exactly that by visiting beatacademy.com. Now, as my gift to you for watching this video, I would love to send you this Ableton Live set so you can rewatch this and follow along. And not just this, but pretty much a lot of the sets that I cover in this channel. Now, mind you, some sets might not be available due to copyright issues with some of the sounds that were being used, but for the most part, I like to use just some of the stock sounds or create sounds that you could use from my own that are able to use in your projects as well. So if you want to have access to the Ableton Live set, as well as the sets for many other breakdowns on this channel, be sure to visit beatacademy.com/pack or click the link below in the description box so that you can have access to that set as well. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. It helps the channel out, and it also helps you stay up to date with upcoming videos that I'll be releasing in the near future. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.